Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the January 2020 the Historic Zoning Commission, and it's designed to be informal and to guide applicants through the process of obtaining a certificate of appropriateness or a COA for projects within the city's historic districts in light of the Historic District Design Guidelines. Applicant participation in this meeting is voluntary but highly recommended, and any changes or suggestions taken by applicants based on the discussions with this committee are the applicant's choice, but the DRC makes no representation as to whether any changes or suggestions made during the meeting will be approved by the voting body, the Historic Zoning Commission. We have 7 items on this afternoon's agenda. When your item is called, please introduce yourself here. Don't forget to hit the button until it's green, and describe your item in 2 to 3 minutes. Item number 1, discussion of building alterations windows at 305 3rd Avenue South. Kevin Coffey, if you'll join us, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good to see you.
Kevin Coffey, if you missed that. You're all familiar with this house. It's been here in different capacities over the last couple of years, a lot, and I wasn't involved in any of that. So I'm working on as a separate design for an interior reconfiguration remodel. And the only place it really shows itself on the exterior is at the existing kitchen. So you have 3 photos there. Obviously, the top left is the front of the house. The wing that we're talking about is to the back right of that picture. That picture just below is looking through that side yard, and you can just, sorry, a summer picture was the only one I had, but you can just pick out that pair of windows right there in that photo. And then the photo on the right shows that pair of windows. They're not particularly old. They're old, but not super old. And you can tell it's been modified. At some point, you can see the brick underneath the windows that at one time the sill was much lower than it is now. Assume there's another window to the left of those that's about 6 feet tall. And there were probably a pair of those in this spot, or maybe even just a single. So these elevations kind of show what we're talking about. The top is the existing condition, and the windows there with the convoluted note under them, that's the original configuration of the window. And I can tell, that it's been modified. The sill is different. The header detail, they shimmed the window down, and it looks like they mimicked one of the cornice details at the top of the window to sit under the lintel, so you can tell it's been messed with. That addition appears first in, I believe, 1908 on the Sanborn map, and then the 1913 Sanborn map is a little more accurate. So I don't know if the 1908 just didn't have as good a draftsman doing that. The 1913 shows that bay where a dining room is in a little bit different configuration, and that's closer to what it is today. So we're talking about a window approximately where that little yellow box is, that's obviously no longer there. None of those outbuildings are there anymore, but you probably know that because I think you've been through that process. So what we're proposing, I never come with just one option, but we're proposing a taller window there that goes all the way up to the lintel, like the original window, but then basically sits counter height of the kitchen. I presume the kitchen in this house used to be back left of the house, and at some point it got relocated to the back right. And that's probably when that window was modified to put it above a kitchen counter. Obviously wasn't an issue in 1908, but became an issue. And we're just proposing either doing a double that's basically the same width and bringing it down to the counter height, as shown in the second drawing. And we would really love to do a triple there and bring it to the counter height. We're remodeling that kitchen behind that space. And that's really all we got.
Okay. Let's hear from staff. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The property at 305 3rd Avenue South is the Miller Beasley House, and it was built in 1866 and is a one-story brick Greek Revival influenced residence that is considered contributing within the National Register. The proposal appears to alter the building by removing a window in the 1908 addition and expanding the window area to accommodate a larger window. The guidelines recommend preserving and maintaining historic windows and historic window openings, so the proposal does not meet the guidelines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody want to kick us off here with any thoughts? Question. So you said the window head now has some type of like filler piece above it?
Yeah, you can
before it
s-
hits the masonry
Yeah,
opening?
you can see it in that photo.
Okay.
I just don't think they would have done that
How
originally.
far is it? Oh,
So you
it's,
see how it drops like 6 inches below the
yeah,
header?
has kind of like a stepped,
Yeah, it's just like
corbelled thing.
the frieze above it, like they took the bottom edge of the frieze and
okay.
put it in there. And I think those windows are probably 70s or 80s vintage that were put in there, but they could have been replaced at some point. I just have no idea.
And the brickwork that's done below it, you think there was something longer there at some point?
I do. I think they were the 6-foot tall windows that matched the others and matched the others all the way around the house.
That skinnier,
Yeah,
the 1908 edition long skinny window is what you think
Correct.
was there. Okay.
And I don't know if there was initially a pair of them there. I think there probably was because of the lintel. But, you know, obviously no photographic evidence of that.
Okay. Anybody have thoughts on his design ideas here?
Well, one of my thoughts is that I think I agree with you that those windows are not original. I mean, to that addition. I mean, you wouldn't have seen those very slender rectangular panes of 8/8 in a window that small. I think it would have been something different. I am interested to know more about, you know, the repair or that we're seeing at the brick at the very bottom. I mean, what is, so the sill or that window ledge on the exterior, what material is that? Is that concrete or limestone?
It looks like a cast concrete, but it's deeper than the typical detail on the house. The typical stone sill, limestone sill that's on the rest of the house is probably 3.5 inches tall, and this is like 5.5 or 6. It just doesn't match the others. I feel like maybe they had an opening and they were trying to fill the whole thing up kind of at some point. So, and the 8/8 thing is the entire house. It's just like every window, no matter what size it is 8/8.
I've
It's an
noticed
odd
that.
configuration.
It is odd, especially all around the house.
Yeah.
If it could be established that was, and try to learn exactly when that happened, that was infilled, and the original windows were larger, I think I could support option A, but not option B, rather than making the opening larger from the opening, the original opening that was there, keeping that same size. But if you can make it longer and match maybe what was originally there, I'd be more able to support that.
I think where we are is on the in-between side of it is, we've got the function of the kitchen behind it. So the sill of the window has to be 3 feet and change. We'd like for it to be 1.5 actually, that sits basically on top of the counter, which means it's going to be, the window's going to be a little bit shorter, like in the second drawing, than what I presume to be the original window. But, you know, it is in a spot as well where changes like that over the years would have been likely to have been made. So I feel like conceptually anyway, it's a, you know, a correct move to
Yeah, I'd
do
say it's
that.
in the spirit. I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah.
that I would support only making it the exact size of all the others. It is in an area, I'm assuming, that cannot be seen from the street, or?
Not at all. I mean, not really. There's kind of a wall and gate toward the street that I'm sure you're very familiar with. And in the summer, obviously, you can't see anything back there. But even once you're through the gate, you can just see it on the periphery. Definitely from the road, it's not visible at all. Not without having a wreck, you know, if you're looking
Well,
at it that closely.
I would encourage, to, when you come before the commission, to document as much as you can with some other photographs, show what's there, show the profile of the windows that are currently there, and really, present to the board, a case with good documentation.
Do you have something, Mary?
Yeah, I would say that the triple window just, to me, doesn't fit with this house at all. So I could totally support your second, the proposal A.
Okay.
But I think getting to the triple window adds a little bit of, I don't know, suburbia to the house.
And
Anything?
I
Bob?
agree with the fellow commissioners, what they've said. I think of any of it, the A plan would fit better with the profile of the side of the home.
Okay. Angela, anything?
What's happening inside? I'm just
So
curious.
that's a kitchen.
But it's above the sink? Is that what
Yes.
you're saying?
Yeah, that
Okay.
window's above the sink. There's the plan. So there's a
Okay.
counter there that exists that we're going to be replacing. So presumably, I mean, right now there's a sink right there, and presumably that will still be the case. It would just be whether it's centered on 2 or centered on 3, which probably the 2.
Okay.
What's that sill height now?
It's like 48, so it's up there almost like when you're looking out the window, you're like this.
Okay.
And you would be dropping it?
Yeah, to
the
36.
sill, okay.
Yeah. 36 and change.
Okay. Well, I do agree with the documentation, and I don't know, from a functional standpoint and even from an aesthetic standpoint, I do think I think you could make a case for the triple window. Just saying.
I would also say, and I know which house it was, I just won't say, but there was a situation where they had this period house and had the long window, and they handled it by putting the countertop and the sink straight across, and that created a cavity, and they did that with copper, and it was really cool. And they used that area to set some plants in by the window. So
I've been there.
if you wanted to do the same, the original configuration.
I've been there. I think in this situation, we are so cramped for storage that having the under cabinets is really kind of important. That's one of the offshoots of historic houses is your kitchen is always undersized for, what people expect for the size of the house. So that's kind of what we're up against there.
Well, 3 windows isn't going to help your storage.
No,
Well,
Lose some uppers.
Yeah, not uppers,
Yeah.
but yeah, the counter still stays. I think, we're looking at light there. It's a nice morning light coming into your kitchen and, that was the hope, but I think everybody would live with the double,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, what I'd say is yeah, I'd love to see, I mean, we have this drawing, but I'd love to see a picture. I don't know if it looks like there might be a holly or something between the 2 windows, maybe not, but to see that long skinny window next to this one. And what I'm looking for is lining up bricks maybe and going, okay, because there's some disturbance under this window. And
Yeah.
I can tell in that picture, but I don't know if it aligns with the other one. But that would help me rationalize, like, okay, there was maybe something longer. When I look at this masonry opening, it's a historic masonry opening. It's not the original OG house, but it's still old. I think it's important to hold that masonry opening, that historic lintel, all that is important. But what happens under it, being able to keep that lintel and those edges to that masonry opening, if it could be extended and we can see that something's been done, I don't know if it's a repair or replacement, but if it lines up with the long skinny window, odds are there was maybe 2 more of these there. But it's kind of, I don't know that it's visible from really anywhere. So I could entertain the idea of the 2. The 3s, I think it'd be pretty, but it's not, our guidelines don't describe any path forward with that, except that we're supposed to try and keep some original and especially original openings, maintaining that architectural detailing, lintel, MO, all that stuff is
Yeah.
probably important.
and this, to me, is a premier home. It's
Yeah, yeah.
of our historic resources. It would make that top.
Yeah, you're going to get a little height at least by replacing it, if
Right.
you replace it. So that'll give you a little more glass area, and then, we're talking a foot longer and 4 inches taller. So that's 16 inches of glass will make a
Yeah.
difference. But like Brian said, document everything, and then I'd love to see a picture of that with a line through the brick, just showing, hey, if you line those sills up, it would be here. I know you're not trying to go that low, but we could see the disturbance in the brick and
Okay.
what's been tuck pointed or replaced. I'm not sure the bricks even match that well through there. I'd have
No,
to see
they
it.
don't. And, it wouldn't have been unheard of in the utilitarian part of the house for the windows to be a different size than that other one also. So
Yeah.
who knows? I doubt we're going to find a picture of that. I doubt it exists, but, we'll check and see if we can find some documentation or maybe from the inside, see if there's an old sill or something down there. But, yeah.
Yeah, if the wall was opened up behind the cabinet, you might be able to see where they've infilled some framing too, which could be helpful. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Have a good one. All right, let's go to item number 2 here. Discussion of fencing at 135 4th Avenue South. James Denny Jr. Hello.
Y'all doing okay today?
If you want to give us just a brief overview, make sure your green light's on your microphone there.
Green lights on.
Green light, that means go.
Sounds good. So, at the Williamson County Courthouse, we're proposing installing a security enclosure around the parking area. We've held it off of the 4th Avenue side, and we've highlighted some pilasters and piers that are made of brick with a multi-height wall. The lower level would be a brick. And, let's see, yeah, you have the entrance on the right-hand side of that image, which would be the pedestrian image from Fourth Avenue. And then we have an automobile entrance on the upper side there. Both would be secure openings. We've held that opening there off Church Avenue to allow any queuing that might need to take place as they're trying to enter that parking area. Let's skip ahead. Yeah. Okay. Good. And so we've reached out and found the exact brick match, which would be the Glengarry. And that would be a portion of the brick wall below, and then the pilaster caps on top of the columns would be a buff color to match the existing building as well. And then this are general details showing the appearance of it with the lower wall. We've highlighted a western red cedar, something that would age properly without needing a whole lot of maintenance. And then showing the pedestrian access for people coming and going from that parking area towards the Fourth Avenue side. Yeah, and then just highlighting a general view of what we're proposing for the vehicular entrance side. Rather than having a sheer flat panel on that side, we've tried to put some type of vertical panels in there just to keep the weight down so those gates operate properly.
Are those metal there?
Yeah.
The whole gate's metal?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's totally opaque?
Totally opaque, yes, sir.
Okay, understood.
And that's really the gist of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's hear staff's comments.
Thank you. So a new privacy and security fence, vehicular and pedestrian gates are proposed around the perimeter of the parking lot around the courthouse, at the rear of the courthouse on the corner of 4th Avenue South and Church Street. The fencing is proposed to utilize a brick base, brick posts, and wood privacy fencing in between the posts, as well as metal for the gates. The height of the fencing is proposed to be 6 foot tall with 8 foot tall brick posts. The pedestrian gate that will front 4th Avenue South appears to use a diagonally patterned metal design. Additional information and/or clarification about the design and materials for the gate are appreciated, as this does appear to be a less traditional design for a gate, but is differentiated from the fencing, which is appropriate. The vehicular gate utilizes a vertical board design and appears more traditional and remains differentiated from the fencing and is appropriate. While not a traditionally seen fence style within the downtown district, similar fencing is seen at the Brownstones, both with iron fencing on top of a brick base and wood privacy fencing on top of a wood base. And similar styles have been approved for new residential buildings at Magnolia Hall. The materials relate to the existing building materials as well. The location of the fencing is more than 20 feet behind the front facade of the building along 4th Avenue South and could qualify for an administrative COA. We would like feedback from the commission this evening on the design of the fencing and appropriateness of it to better understand if it should return to the Historic Zoning Commission, or if you all would be comfortable with the application being administratively reviewed and approved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If I could, I'd also
Sure,
like to
go ahead.
interject that diagonal pattern on that fence is just a pattern for graphic representation. It's actually proposed to be a smooth surface.
Okay. So those whole panels that have the diagonal hatching are just solid, flat panels?
They are.
Okay.
And our initial design tries to pick up some of the elements on the windows. That way it ties back a little bit. And we've done a custom design metal panel with some reveals around it just to give it a little additional elements.
Okay. All right, who's got some comments here? Brian?
Elizabeth, could you show me am I looking at the pedestrian gate? Is that what we're seeing?
Yes, this would be fronting Fourth Avenue South in between the courthouse and the Dan German Building.
So it has two gates. It's not just like a door, a pedestrian door.
Yes, it appears like two gates.
It is actually one door, but we've emulated the other door so that it appears, what am I trying to say?
Like a double.
Like a double door, yeah,
Okay, so it does function like a door.
it does, yeah.
And what I'm seeing to the left, those are cedar vertical panels
They are, yeah,
on top of the brick.
it is, yeah.
And do you need that privacy, or could you use more of an open design like with iron,
Well,
like
the-
you're doing the gate?
Yeah, the intent behind it is to provide security for the law enforcement, the judges, as they're coming out, preferably in the evenings, especially with their backs turned towards the street sometimes. And so the intent is to have the security of it.
So you're looking for something that's solid then?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Now, the only reason I brought that up, I know at the Brownstones, we said there are some cedar, but it is residential in nature, while this is more commercial in nature. So that's the only thing, and I know that our guidelines, we usually ask for more of a metal in this case,
Yeah.
but it sounds like it might be a special case. I'd like to hear more from the board.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts? Anybody? Angela?
Well, it does make sense that you wouldn't want to see inside there. I mean, it is a security fence, and that of utmost importance would be not being able to be seen.
Yeah.
Seems logical.
Yeah, Bob?
It does seem logical. With current events and other things regarding judges, I think you do need the security for them to enter and exit.
Mary, any thoughts?
Well, my thought may be a investment issue. Is it possible just to do brick
As far as all the way.
and not have the wood panels?
It does get a little heavy, and it gets the intent was to break it up because it does face residential areas, and it's still an open park to the sides of it, so we're trying to keep the human scale and not seem like such an overbearing wall.
And it's 6 feet tall, right?
It is.
There is a brick wall across the, I don't know, do we want to call it the back of this property, by the Sally Port?
There is. And I actually believe that wall is much taller than 6 feet.
And it's much taller than 6 feet.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Well, if it's possible, to me, a brick would look fantastic. And the metal, I think that is just a deal where the devil's in the details on, how you make that read. I can understand totally why you want it, why the county would want it.
Yeah, I had the same thought about, you have a civic building that's just, we usually consider those a little differently, and even in terms of materials, so that was one of my initial thoughts, was this really ought to be just brick or stone or something that's more monumental because of the function of the building. So I think brick would be more appropriate than wood. I think the wood is more residential. And I get why you were going there because it's facing residential, but it's downtown. It's on a civic monumental building. I think it's, and then we're City Hall is not directly adjacent, but it's going to have some brick walls around it in certain portions too. So I think it's the threshold for where we become kind of our civic downtown area. The other thing I wanted to comment on was, it looks like you've got existing, this picture says existing cast stone. Is that cast stone or is it I mean, we've got some split face kind of Indiana limestone, but all the cut stone there, is that actually
it's
cast or is it
limestone.
real?
It's all cast.
It's real.
It's real
Isn't
limestone.
it the real limestone, as I remember working on that building?
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm wrong, but I
Yeah.
remember that was a big budget consideration.
And that's, I was going to say about the cast stone is there've been some pushback from the commission on cast stone that's supposed to represent cut like Indiana limestone. And so I would encourage you to bring back a real Indiana limestone, or if it goes to an all brick wall, maybe it's just brick caps. I think the limestone complements the building, but I don't think the wall has to be as ornamented and detailed as the building, but I think it has to go together. So that's my couple comments.
And I would say that to agree with my fellow commissioners, brick would better meet the guidelines. And you think about the cedar panels, so either they're going to gray if they're not finished or painted, which is kind of be a mismatch with the brick, or you've got to stain or paint it. And I would like for this to come back to the Historic Zoning Commission rather than being administratively approved.
Yeah, for this particular project, again, it's a monumental civic building, so.
Right. And Mr. Chair, I have one more question. Do you need the big opening of the gate? Is that a function thing?
For the pedestrian entrance, there's really only one panel that opens.
Well, I think if it read like, one gate, that, that would also be something that would, to me, fit into the downtown area. This is getting close, if it's metal, to looking like it could be a waste enclosure. We've done them similar with metal. So,
Yeah, if that pier there
Yeah.
moved over, not to say you don't have these little side light panels.
Right.
But if it got narrow enough that it didn't look like
yeah, two
A dumpster
sidelights
enclosure.
and one pedestrian
Yeah.
door. So it looked just like
a
what it
garden
was.
gate, yeah.
Yeah, and it brings it down to a human scale.
Yeah, so there is a existing sidewalk there that comes off of Fourth Avenue, and we've tried to space it on both sides of that existing sidewalk so that you still have that overall width coming in. And that's the reason we've taken that path, is so that we don't have to basically alter any sidewalk. Yeah.
I really don't think you would have to. I mean, looks-wise, you wouldn't have to. If you could just cut a piece and maybe negotiate it with
Yeah, they'll have
something.
they'll tear that sidewalk up with footings.
For the footings,
Yeah,
right.
and so they'd have to cut back.
They'd
They'd
have
cut
to
a section
cut
out.
it, yes, cut a
and
section
redo a
out.
section, but you may have to do
No,
that.
actually, we've spaced it to where we wouldn't affect that sidewalk.
Well, that's what
whenever
she's
we're putting in the
saying.
foundations.
She would
And, yeah. if
prefer
I-
that a section be cut out and it be skinnied up.
Just in that, it doesn't matter if the sidewalk.
Runs into the brick wall, part of it.
But you need to get the footings. I appreciate that you have to do the footings. Oh, I don't have that.
I could hear you.
I appreciate that you don't have to do the footing. I understand that.
Is the vehicular gate, it does look like it's two-lane traffic. It's big enough for
Yeah.
in and out at the same time. Okay.
It is.
27 and a half feet from the curb cut. Okay. Any other comments, anybody? Okay. I think we've given you some feedback. Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming.
Well, while you're here, compliment the county on Dan German. Looks great.
Thank you. All right, item number 3, discussion of building alterations and dormer construction at 1010 Fair Street. Amanda McCreary. Good afternoon.
Sorry, guys, had to bring all my stuff with me. Hi, I'm Amanda McCreary, Chisel Workshop. We are looking at the project on 1010 Fair Street. It's towards the end of 11th. It's a few houses over from 11th. This particular house does have an addition that was put on around 2005, is what we understand from the previous owners. We are not looking to change the shape or the size of the existing roof. So the existing house has a roof that is over the side porch that you can see on the back left of these existing drawings. And so on that area in particular, we are looking to enclose portions of that roof in order to gain us a mud room, a laundry room, a space on the first floor that we can get also through the house and to the rear of the property through the house. Currently, in order to get to the rear of the property, we have to go out the side through the driveway and on a gate to get to the rear. And because of this, using the space under the roof, it does not change any of the existing building footprint as calculated from the roof lines from that instance. We are looking to put on that left side of the house a new dormer on the second floor in order to gain a little bit more space for a bathroom. There's an existing dormer on the right side. We're looking to add one to the left side. These elevations here show enclosing that area to the left and putting the dormer on the top portion where the new bathroom would go. And there is an existing rear addition off the back that we are looking to change the current roof lines on just to gain us a little bit more headspace in that area. The rear portion of the house, it does have 3 windows in the back, and we would like to propose putting those in as double doors. We're showing panels below with glass above, third panels, 2/3 light. None of the windows on the house are divided, so we are not showing any divided light in these doors to open up the space to the backyard. That existing shed that's off the back, the portion that's off the back has a 6-panel door. We would like to get rid of the 6-panel door and put a window in its place. The windows that are shown in that location and on the side elevation where we're enclosing under the porch are the same size as some existing windows that are in the project that's on the right side towards the rear. So those windows are of the same size that you can see that are on that side elevation, the smaller size windows there. So it just kind of keeps that pattern going. And that's really where we're at.
Okay, let's hear from staff, please.
So the property at 1010 Fair Street is considered to be a contributing building that is a circa 1920s 1.5-story bungalow within the National Register listing. The proposal involves infilling the side porch on the left elevation. A new shed dormer is proposed on the roof. On the rear of the non-historic part of the building, the existing windows are proposed to be removed and the French doors are proposed to be installed. One new man door is proposed on the corner of the infilled portion and a window on the 2010 garden shed addition. The garden shed portion is also proposed to alter the existing roof shape, which will blend with the roof forms seen on the building. The guidelines recommend designing doors and doorways to an addition to be compatible with the historic district, to read as secondary in appearance and detail in the historic building, and design new windows and new window openings to be compatible with surrounding historic buildings. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, let's hear from someone with some comments, please.
Well, I'll start with the dormer.
Okay.
I think the dormer is hidden from the street, and it seems to be in keeping with the style of the house. I think the dormer fits with our guidelines. I remember being in this house, probably about 2005. They were trying to sell it because it had just been remodeled. And I think it was on the Heritage Foundation Tour of Homes. The part I'd like to discuss, though, so the infill area of that porch, is that porch original or is that part of the addition?
That was part of the addition. When we looked on the Sanborn maps, that was never part of it. So from the back corner, we've labeled kind of the edge showing some dimension lines. That is the rear of the addition part. So that entire large gable off the back was part of the 2005 addition.
And even that side porch?
Even the side porch, yes.
addition. So the
Yes.
windows that are there, they're not original?
No, they're not. None of the original windows in the front are actually in really great shape, but nothing that's there on that sort, they're all typical double hung insulated glass windows.
So talk to me about the very rear where I'm seeing the two, are those two double doors?
It
two French
is, yes,
doors?
two French doors opening up to
And
the
that's part
backyard.
of the addition too?
Yes, yes, all of that is part of, and the big gable with the casement window above, that's all existing. So that was all part of the 2005. So we're proposing taking out those three windows that are in the back and doing French doors instead to open up the space, and then changing the roof lines over the shed portion there to give us some more head heights.
I'm interested to hear more comments from the board members, but the two double French doors don't seem to be compatible with what you normally see in the neighborhood. It is on the rear of the building,
It is.
so that's why I'd like to hear more comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary, look like you.
Can you show us the elevation where you're closing it in on that longer exterior wall? If we could pull that up. To me, if I'm looking at it right, the part of the original part of the house that has the bay window.
Currently, it sits back, I think, about 12 to 14 inches from that corner is where you can see it on the pictures. So the addition that was built in 2005 already sits back from the trim standpoint, and then the soffit overhangs it as well. So we're back, we're not building out any further than that. So the existing roof line, the existing rafter tails that are there on the addition stays. Is that you can see a little bit of the siding above that beam right there. We actually have kept a little bit of a recess at that door location to allow movement into the side door so that beam would stay. But everything on that left portion is the part that gets infilled. And so that wall already sits back and we are not changing. We'll be able to build underneath the existing roof line.
If there were a way to consider that not being quite as heavy-handed, I mean, that's a place, I think, maybe more glass would be your friend. So that it's not quite as heavy and look to the addition, which is already fairly good size. And I think figuring out the doors on the back of the house, I think you can probably achieve the same thing with just a little bit different configuration that goes more with the style of the house.
Okay. Bob or Angela, anything?
Well, I was looking at these double doors on the back. Those are being requested because there's going to be some future work done.
There's currently a pool back there, and so part of it was just an opportunity to be able to open up and be a little bit, let some of the air in and be able to move back and forth between the pool, and the space that's in there, yes. And plus, because the windows that are there and all of that is not original, it was all part of the addition. It was just an opportunity to let a lot more light in and get some openness.
Okay. Anything else, Bob?
Nope.
Angela, anything?
I guess the double French doors don't bother me so much. But that's more from an aesthetic standpoint or the impact of the building. Because I do understand they're wanting more flow back and forth from the outdoors in. And there's a large tree back there, so it seems like the extra light is a positive thing for this family. But in terms of the neighborhood, I can't speak to that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a call out. I did look at the double doors and I thought, well, it's all the way on the back. Assuming they even had some more capacity to add on, we'd let them cut a big hole and put more house there. So I don't have a problem with that necessarily. Is there, and this is just a question I'm seeing kind of graphically. So we've got this new window in the potting shed. It's got some head height, but the doors are a shorter head height. Is the potting shed going to be vaulted, or or the doors are shorter because of the eave hanging down, or what's the,
Part of it is any of the doors that have been put on the existing are 6'8",
okay, so you're just matching.
and we're just matching.
Okay.
And then that window head height is matching the window head heights that are in the rest of the building. We can move that window down, especially for that elevation, if we feel we want to get that window to 6'8".
It doesn't bother me. I just thought maybe you'd want taller doors.
Well, yeah, it just makes it a little tricky trying to get a nice gable roof on that potting shed with I don't want to get the overhangs and the rafter tails all messed up with the door. But yeah, the existing rear is 6'8" on all the doors, whereas the historic is 7'2".
Okay. Yeah, and I think, and Mary can jump in. Misunderstood, but that side elevation, the infill part of the porch, it doesn't bother me much to infill it. It's all under roof footprint that's already there. It's just that the detailing on that side, usually on our garage, the driveway side,
Right.
there's just a little more visibility from the public. And to have these two kind of they look small in this drawing, but they're probably not small windows. But there's a lot of siding, and I think to her point, it was like, that's kind of prime real estate for bigger windows and like not just utility space. We're not here to criticize floor planning. I haven't even looked at the floor plan, but
Right.
But I think that's what she was hinting at, is like this went from being see-through and having porch look to now it's solid
Right.
building, and there's a lot of solid. So it's a big change. I think if this showed up and you were just adding this on, this 2010 edition, if you were doing it now, we'd go, it probably meets the guidelines pretty well. But we might have the same comment that, maybe shuffle the plan in a way that this has a little more windows, but it's got two.
Well, and I think the reality too is like we're trying to not disturb it as much as possible that's there, and so we're using that infill as an opportunity. And there is a powder room there, and there is a very small laundry room, and we got a stack washer and dryers. So can we put more windows in? Yes, but then we're gonna have to board them all from the inside just because of the functionality of it. We did look at several floor plan options, and this was the cleanest that. We didn't come to you asking for more space. That allowed us to kind of stay under the existing roof line and gain the laundry room down, and gain us access from inside the house to the backyard without going around the house. It was tricky. I hear you, because it would be nice if that was one big giant mudroom and we could get 3 windows in or something like that, but it was difficult to do. I do know that the clients, we've already started engaging a landscape architect involved in the project too. So I know you can't review landscaping as part of the
Plants die.
design, but the reality is something will be there. And I know you guys can't regulate that because what if it dies and all of that. But I hear you, and I've looked at it. It's just a challenge given the amount of space that we have.
I don't think what you've shown is inappropriate. I think it was just a comment that that's a lot. We're going from transparent to opaque there. And one of the things I wrote down too was, have you run the numbers for like your addition percentage stuff? I know you're not adding anything, but I'm always considerate of this kind of, even if you're 60% of the original house footprint, now we can make an argument for increasing the level of nonconformity by conditioning more of it, if that makes sense. So I'd love to just see the numbers when you,
Yeah, we can
come
run that.
for
It was
COA.
below, it was above 50, but not much. I can't remember if we were in the 52 range. And that was considering the roof footprint, not necessarily that. So I was trying to be cognizant of that, but we can put that on there. And the other thing
it's a
that
big
we.
lot too, isn't
It
it?
is a huge lot. We're like at 10% of the lot size.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
and
and
that
those
was
are-
even considering that if they want to put a garage or something on later, we've got
Yeah.
a ton of space with the lot. And the other thing with that elevation too, that might help is we were maintaining that head height, that higher 7'2" head height of the windows that were elsewhere. But we can also look at lowering those heads to 6'8" where the door is now, and see just getting a little bit more forehead above those windows, that the proportions will probably look better. And because you really can't see the left side and the right side together, you'll really never correlate that those are off a little bit. So that might be the solution to get the proportions right for that elevation, is let's just look at lowering the head heights in this area to be more consistent with that 6'8" datum line.
Okay. Yeah, because the bay is a little lower than the others.
It is, and we weren't really changing that beam height that was there, so that's where
I
some of
think
that started.
that's a great suggestion.
And I think another thing that maybe is not seen because these are two-dimensional drawings, but I'm assuming where the door is, that remains where it was before. So it's recessed back. It's like a little stoop area.
It
a
is.
little porch you walk in on.
Right.
Which is going to break that.
It will.
up
It
from
breaks
there,
it
too.
up.
We pulled it
Yeah.
out a little bit so we can get into the mudroom area, but it's still recessed back a significant amount, so you have a little, yeah, and you do miss that a little bit with some shading would help with that.
Right.
And had this been an original porch and not an addition, I would be more inclined to go with Mary's idea.
Right.
In order to try to preserve those original elements.
Right,
But in this case, it really doesn't matter.
right. And we have the
And-
pictures from where it was
yeah.
built.
And I think what is getting my eye, if you pull those down, it will help.
Okay.
And one other thing, generally, as you move toward the rear of the house, especially on additions, you usually see windows get a little smaller. So I think it's very appropriate, in the size
Yep.
that you've chosen.
Good. Anything else, anybody? Angela?
I would just say I think it's a sensitive adaptation to this original building, it looks to me like. And I love the fact that you kept that door recessed on the back. And it may just be in this drawing, but that the heights of those windows back there on that infill part, it doesn't, that, it's not as jarring, I think, to me as it may be for others. So, but your recommendation was
Thank you.
was very interesting.
Good. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, let's go to item number 4 here. Discussion of demolition and accessory structure, building alterations, ramp construction, rear dormer construction, site alterations at 234 4th Avenue North. Harpeth Architects, Daniel Kiedis. I was close.
All right, green light. So I'll just give a little context before I pass it off to Sam here. Their team at Harpeth's been doing a great job. This is adaptive reuse, modest expansion of a property that staff's been incredibly helpful in bringing us up to speed on some of the history of this. This is new to us. We just purchased it in November, but it's familiar to you all, no doubt, from what we've seen in some of the past permits. So we're trying to be very considerate in some of the history and what's kind of already been discussed. A couple things to keep in mind that may be helpful. This is being transitioned from a residential to a commercial property, so we're looking for a change of occupancy and planning to go through the full process for COA. And this is going to be owner-occupied by our company. Company's been in Franklin as a Franklin-run business for the last decade. We're an Emmy Award-winning production company in studio, deep ties to this area, and really, really excited to be moving our office kind of from outer skirts of Franklin back into the downtown area. We have a lot of things on the list, want to be mindful of timing. I think the biggest thing that we wanted to call out, there's some aspects that are probably more of a priority to us in this moment, the dormer being probably the largest one. and then a number of other considerations that we have where we would love to get your opinions as we're in more of an exploration phase and want to take the opportunity to get your thoughts while we're here. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that most of the alterations we're proposing are driven by code necessity due to the change of occupancy. The main voluntary one that is applicable to the current plan reviews and process for the project is the dormer. In order to create a little bit more space up in the attic area where we're adding some upper office space. And then the other voluntary one is we wanted to get everyone's insight on proposing demolishing the ADU. That is not part of the current plan reviews and process, but while we're here, wanted to include that just to get your insight on that. Mainly because it's very utilitarian, doesn't match the architectural style of the house. It appears to be added later, and so our thoughts were that it would benefit the site and the historical character of it if it was no longer on the property, just since it definitely isn't at the same level as the house. So.
Okay. Thank you. Let's hear from staff, please.
Thank you. So there are a few requests to discuss within this DRC application. The site features a circa 1935 minimal traditional style Tudor influenced building. We'll start with the site alteration. A new ramp and walkway are proposed from the rear entrance of the building up by the parking area that is existing and to the sidewalk. The path and the ramp appear to be appropriately located and of appropriate materials. We'll move to the principal building alterations. A shed dormer is proposed at the rear of the building. A COA was issued within the last year for similar dormer construction on the building. And the guidelines would recommend that the dormer be removed from the main ridge. However, this may create a roof slope less than 3/12. So that would be a consideration. Sidewall siding materials, the reveal should be closer to 4.5 to 5 inches or consistent with the adjacent historic buildings rather than 6 inches as shown. Other alterations proposed on the rear entrance in order to accommodate an accessible entrance. The entrance is proposed to be widened to 36 inches and a new 16-light rear door is proposed. The guidelines would recommend to preserve original or historic doors and entrances. However, because this is located on the rear of the building, it may be more appropriate. However, it would be recommended to preserve that door for future reuse if possible. Specifications for the new light fixtures on the building are needed for the COA submittal for review. The new mechanical and exhaust vents on the sides of the building appear to be on less visible facades and are appropriate. And the new mechanical units on the side of the building where there is an existing unit is screened by a decorative wall from street view, but additional information is needed to confirm that all 3 units will continue to be screened. If not, additional structural or landscape screening may be required to fully screen the units. And third, we'll touch on the discussion of the demolition of the accessory structure. The 1972 multiple property listing shows the structure present on the site on maps and would make the structure historic by age. The National Register lists the structure as a 1970 CMU block building, but it is listed as a non-contributing structure in the 2018 listing. Feedback and discussion about the proposed demolition of the structure is appreciated. One of the 3 criteria for demolition would need to be submitted for review and would only be approved if the Historic Zoning Commission deems the conditions met. Additional guidelines for consideration include determining the significance of the structure and whether the structure retains its historic integrity, the impact the removal of the structure would have on the surrounding context, and understanding the proposed redevelopment, which is all within the floodplain, and any new future development will still require a COA in this location. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone have any comments? Mary?
Well, this has been used as a bookkeeping business for years. So they're having to change it to what it already was.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Do you know the answer to that?
No, is it, so it was a business before, but it was
Yes.
operating just out of a house? It was
Yeah,
never,
it came as a surprise to all of us because it did appear to be a business before.
It was a business.
Yeah, and even
I-
has the parking lot,
My
existing parking lot
bookkeeper
there.
was there for, and CPA for, I went there for, 30 years, so
Yeah, and so the change of occupancy was a surprise for everybody, including the owners, because
It's
we
a
didn't find out till after
surprise.
they even purchased the property that it
Yeah.
had been filed as residential, which was surprising. but-
that's surprising to me because no one, I promise, lived there. It was Mr. Dan Parsons and his daughter Patty who ran a CPA firm there, so I'd just make that comment. Don't know what that's kicking in for these new owners, but I have a pretty good idea. And then as far as the demolition of the building, I'm sort of like, are you sure you want to do that? Because what's going to happen is it's going to have to be lifted so much that coming back, if you ever wanted to add something, is going to be complicated. So I would just say that.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that, and we've been weighing that. I think the challenge is if we want to do anything to it, my understanding is we would still have to do that to
Still
bring it
have
up
to
to
do
code.
it, okay.
So if that is going to be the case, as we understand it, unless we're wrong, we would have more problems bringing the existing
Gotcha.
building up to code than creating a new building that's more aesthetically pleasing.
I mean, I think that the fact that it's non-contributing makes a case for tearing it down, but I don't know how long it's been since we updated that survey, and it may be considered contributing at this point, so.
We were curious too, and feel free to weigh in on this, but I know at this point, there used to be a garage door there at some point. The track system is still present.
It was, and yes, there
So it's
was.
been changed to a degree, and I don't know to what extent that weighs in.
And that's fairly recent.
Has it been? Okay. And then from the inside, we're definitely going to need to assess it structurally. There's, in terms of the framing of it, the interior is definitely not sound at the moment. So there'd be other considerations as well,
Right.
just to put that out there. But I appreciate that.
I think to Mary's point, we haven't seen a proposal for what might happen one day. But if you ever tried to design something to go back there and it had to meet the flood regs and codes, it may be something that the Historic Zoning Commission would never approve because it may be not meet the guidelines. It'll have to be taller than this little Tudor house that will now be your offices. Like, you run a real risk of never getting something approved because it just would be almost an impossibility, if that makes sense. So that's, I think
Just
to Mary's point, if you
consideration.
just go, we just don't want anything back there, and we don't want to have to fool with when it floods, redoing it 9,000 times, then I'd go, okay. It's a block building. It's not, I wouldn't say it's architecturally remarkable, but it is, contextual for its age and the kind of stuff we see around the neighborhood, especially that side of town. There's some block buildings and yurts and all kinds of oddities over there that live. So it's not, its weirdness is kind of seen in that side of town. So I don't feel strongly one way or the other about saving it or not because, architecturally it's like, well, it's just a block building. It was never built to be that remarkable. It was a utility building. So I don't know how everybody else feels about it.
Do you know currently, is it zoned for a living space? You call it an accessory dwelling unit, or has it been used for a garage?
I mean, if it was used for a garage, they wouldn't have been able to fit the car in there. So I'm really not sure. It would have been probably some sort of a storage building, I'd imagine. In the interior is unfinished at the moment with drywall or anything else. There's not a restroom in there. So I'm not exactly sure.
And I'm not an expert on the zoning regulations for floodplains, but I have some experience.
Sure.
And I would say that anything you tear down, because it's not attached to the building, you can't finish it or use it for any kind of space, living or business that I know of, unless there's something different on commercial. And you said this is residential and you're going to have it rezoned to commercial?
That's what our understanding is.
I mean, so, there are a lot of issues here to work through.
Yeah.
And generally with the floodplain regulations, 50%, if you do more than 50%, you have to lift the building. So I don't know how they calculate that value on this. Is it part of the house or part of this structure? So, I mean, you have a lot of things to find out. And I would say that you're probably better off keeping what you have and trying to see what you can do with it than demolishing it. But that's a decision,
Yeah.
you'll have to make.
Well, and all that to say, I'm looking at your survey here, and behind the house has some buildable area. Having the building as it sits today would preclude you from building a separate one behind the house in the spot that it could be built. So,
That might be an argument.
yeah, you, like I said, if that building's required to be kept, you can never build another separate building. But if it goes, you could build something that could be usable and wouldn't have to be lifted on that buildable area that's behind. So,
That
you know,
makes sense.
I don't know that it makes me feel any different. It's just a fact of the matter.
So the rear of the property is out of the floodplain?
Just that area behind the house.
Oh, that area right there, okay.
Yeah, which is behind the green sidewalk there until you hit the hatched is the floodplain.
Gotcha.
So actually, the house isn't in the floodplain. Looks like it's just like its own little.
Yeah, it's on an island.
Island.
Yeah, it's a sweet island.
Yeah.
You're fortunate.
Yes.
Fortunate.
Yes, and we haven't engaged a civil engineer, but as they've let us know, I mean, there's a cut fill, I guess, process that we could go through to maybe extend that back portion a little bit further. But again, all exploration at this point, I think your comments are incredibly helpful, and there's a lot to consider.
Sure.
For sure.
Anybody else have comments on Brian?
Just to provide some clarification, it is zoned OR, so it's office residential. While we don't review use here with the Historic Zoning Commission, Jared has provided some insight that when building permits were most recently submitted, they were submitted for residential uses. So going in for commercial, you'd have to update that. No.
Okay.
So past building permits.
So the previous approvals that they've gotten were residential, and those are fairly recent? Last year. Okay, the stuff we reviewed came in and got a residential permit. So the assumption there was maybe somebody was going to live in this.
And so if somebody just brings a plan in for residential, then the use is changed?
Since it's OR, one use has to be established when you're going in. It's either office or residential.
Does the permit have to
Wow.
be completed before it's,
The construction was never
the
completed.
construction was never completed?
No.
I know
Yeah,
that's
it's
not
just-
this meeting, I'm just,
Yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
I can imagine, and Jared could talk to this, is that
I don't understand.
yeah, you get a residential building permit's reviewed under a different code. Okay?
Correct.
Which is a lesser requirement usually.
Right, but if you're office residential, it seems, the name seems to me, it leaves both
That's just zoning, that's
opportunities.
not code.
Code,
Yeah,
zoning,
that's
okay.
right. So zoning
So-
just means it could be either one, but you have to pick which one. So like when they go for a building permit, they will have to apply under commercial codes, which has all kinds of implications from different floor loading requirements to, I mean, all kinds of things that are different that they'll review. And Jared's kind of nodding like, yeah.
And it's worth noting, a lot of some of the changes we're proposing, including adding the accessible route and from the accessible parking and adding in the landing in the back to maintain an accessible slope up to the entrance. All of that is triggered by the change of occupancy.
Right.
Right.
By code, which if it hadn't been, if it hadn't been filed previously as residential, that some things wouldn't, not all the things that are being triggered now would have been triggered.
Yes. Yeah, and we'll let you, obviously the codes folks, you'll have to work some of that stuff out with them. If the permit was never executed but issued, who knows how that works? That's not our purview, so I won't even try to talk to that.
Yeah,
but-
since we're discussing things out of our purview, we
Yeah,
should talk
I'm like-
about something in
Yeah,
it,
I'm like,
which is,
nothing to do.
which is dormers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the rear dormer, I think we should address that. It was brought up by staff. This hides it up on the ridge. You know, I think our guidelines say it should come off the ridge some. So I think we should discuss maybe
Yeah.
some of that.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody comments on that, aside from what staff recommended, which is just, I mean, it's listed out in our guidelines.
Don't
Follow?
have to be taken off the ridge line.
Yeah,
But that drops their slope below the 312. Now, that could be handled with a metal roof if it's below 312. Is that what I understood?
I'm not sure the guidelines accommodate anything below 312. Is that true?
You all have the purview to approve something a little bit less than 3/12.
Right.
I know we've approved that before, and generally it has a metal roof.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and for me too, on this situation, you know, I'm really concerned, if I were standing on the street, what can you see this from the rear? And any other public views, what do you see? And, you know, if it's not something that's highly visible from any view, I mean, to have it at that 312 where it is, I don't know that that's a huge issue. It's worthy for some discussion.
Yeah, I guess my concern would be kind of the constructability. Usually if it reaches up to the ridge, there's some type of detail there where they've got to lap things where you can kind of see it from the front. And sometimes it's just a flashing line, especially if it's going to a metal roof. But, you know, I think the guidelines were written for that reason and others, so that you kind of always
So
know
it is
where the
pretty-
the existing historic house was and what's added on.
So from Margin and Fourth, it's fairly visible. Okay. Then I would say it needs to meet the guidelines.
Yeah,
It does
drop
have
down.
a wing of the house that extends out on the left side that would screen a majority of the dormer
Right.
from that angle.
Yeah, I don't think, I'm not hearing that we have an issue with the dormer specifically. It's just where that tie-in point is. Guidelines just say it should not be up at the tip top of the ridge. It just has to be pulled down a little. And usually when it gets, you know, that's going to change your slope or your bearing height, one or the other. And the idea would be if it's less than a 312 slope, we typically like to see it in metal. And most folks like to do it in metal too, because shingles don't like 212 or whatever it's going to be. So I think that's staff's kind of recommendation there as well. Any thoughts on the widening of the rear entrance? I think it sounds like a code requirement as well. Any thoughts on that?
Is that a code requirement?
I think it's your accessible entrance. Jared's nodding yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it'd be great to have your insight on that too. Yeah, the code, because it's going through a change of occupancy, code requires that at least one entrance be made
Okay.
accessible with an accessible route. And so the existing door is not, it's not the correct width for accessible.
So how wide's the front door?
I would have to double check.
Okay. Oftentimes the front door might be an accessible width, but there's no accessible route to it. So it's like,
And
well,
Then
you don't,
have to
you have,
put
yeah.
the ramp and everything.
Yeah.
And then the ramp, we deal with it being near the front, which doesn't meet our guidelines.
Through discussions, it was easier to go through the back portion of it.
Yeah, it would be much less intrusive on the.
Understood. And I agree with that. So it's, how wide is it now?
4, I believe, somewhere thereabouts.
Yeah, and then code requires that from frame to door, when it's at a 90-degree angles, is 30, no less than 32. So usually go with a 36 wide
Yeah,
door.
understood. Any reaction to that?
It would be great if, when you get the new door, if you could find something that looks appropriate to the age of the house, but.
And I'm assuming all this is a stone veneer. Correct. It's frame construction, stone veneer. And how would you propose handling it to, as you chip away that stone or cut it away, to make it look like nothing ever happened? That would be interesting to know.
Yeah, just trying to minimize as much of the impact as possible. There is some room based on where the masonry comes together where we'll have a little bit of leniency, but we've got to look at it specifically to know, the right application. We're looking at a couple of different doors that might allow us to tighter jam as well. That could be potentially helpful to minimizing that, but that's part of what we're trying to figure out. Yeah, definitely don't relish the idea of breaking into that too much.
So we've talked about new ramp and walkway a little bit. Well, the ramp and walkway, we talked about its location, its necessity based on that accessible route. Dormer, staff hit on the reveals, more of a 4.5 to 5 inch reveal, which seems fairly easy to accomplish. Wider rear entrance, and then the demo of this block building we talked about. Plenty. Anything else or any other specific feedback you're looking for?
Screening.
We were just curious to get your guys' take on if we need additional screening for the 2 additional condensers we're adding, and then also the new landing we're adding to provide an accessible route up to that back entry as well. That'll be new.
So I saw those mechanical units somewhere here.
Yes, yeah, that's where they are. There's currently one, and we're
There's
proposing-
one in that same location now. You're putting another one next to it. There's a little fin wall that comes off.
Yeah.
How tall is that wall now?
I don't know the exact height. It's the height of the AC. It's slightly taller than the AC unit, I believe. Yeah, there you go. That picture's helpful.
And zoning requires that mechanical units be fully screened. So, and our guidelines would recommend either structural or landscaping to screen it more if it needs it.
Yeah. I think if you come in with some plan to screen the other 2 sides, I probably wouldn't be in favor of manipulating that wall to make it taller or anything. I think it just is what it is and is doing a great job for 100 years or however old it is. But if you wanted to come off of that pier and do a low fence or a wall or landscaping, work with staff on that just to meet the requirement there. And the requirements are different for commercial than residential, or is it the same screening requirements? I know zoning for commercial buildings has some screening rules. Maybe I'm thinking of rooftop.
I know for sure, just from experiences with commercial use buildings, it needs to be fully screened from off-site. For residential, I would have to double check with our zoning administrator.
Okay. Any feedback on the landing in the back or the walkway? Looks good. It's a sidewalk and a landing.
And I just wanted to note as well, we are proposing some regrading up from where the parking is to that, just to minimize the extent that landing and slope needs to be.
But it's all, the grading looks like it's from close to the maybe 6 or 7 feet in front of the back corner of the house and then just a bit in the backyard. Is that true? And I don't know if you all see those solid lines there where the grading is. It's kind of right next to that 5% slope sign closest to the accessible parking place. So there's one line that moves. Back. Do the 5% line on the green. Right there. Yep, and you see the line right on the right of the 5%? That's the floodplain line. I need a pointer. It's the grade line below it that says 637. Yep, right there. That's a new grade line, and then the next layer up is 638. That's a new grade line. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well,
So the grading only changes up to that point, but doesn't go more than 6 or 7 feet beyond the back corner of the house.
I think when it comes to historic zoning, maybe a little more perspective on, does it require railing, those kinds of, how tall is it? What does that look like?
Yeah. The stoop, 18 inches above grade, it looks like, based on 639.6, 639.6, 638.10. It's not even that tall.
Yeah, it's
8
pretty,
inches.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
Okay. So no rails around the landing.
No
Only
rails.
on one side, there would need to be
A
guardrails because
guard.
of the drop on the grade being over 30.
Being more 638 to 639.6. Okay.
And by keeping the grading at a 5% or less slope, that then we don't have to have the guardrails that are required for accessible ramps, since it's technically not a ramp
Okay.
at that point.
Tyler, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Did you have the materials specified on there for what your sidewalks were or what your, what it was going to be?
I don't believe that is specified yet. The intent was that it was going to be just concrete.
Okay, because both of us would like to know that as well.
Sure.
So I figured-
Yeah. Good question. Yeah. So it's going to go, and it does come up and tie into the existing kind of T-shaped sidewalk. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments on that? All right. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Thank you, Jerry. Item number 5, discussion of demolition, accessory structure, and a principal building alterations and an addition at 210 3rd Avenue North. This says Brandon Pretty, but
Yes.
you're much better looking.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My name is Aaron Rogers with 906 Studio, and this is our client, Sean Aiello.
What's your name?
Sean Aiello,
How do you spell your last name?
very Italian. Aiello.
A-I-E-L-L-O.
Yes, sir.
Well, mine's LaMarinelle, so I didn't learn that till about 6th grade. All right. If y'all want to give us a brief overview here, and then we'll hear from staff, please.
Sure. We brought this project to you at the last DRC. This is a structure located at 210 3rd Avenue North, what was formerly a dental office. Sean is an attorney here, deep roots in the community, and he is proposing renovating the structure, the home, to be a law office. So we have a description of some of the work here. We're going to propose a full renovation, removing the exterior asbestos containing siding, uncovering the lap siding that exists. Sean has areas of the home where you can see that there is some lap siding that currently exists, so we would propose replacing that in kind. We also propose removing the existing front porch and modifying the roof to expose some of the historic detailing that currently is hidden by the roof that exists at the porch currently. There's some corbel and freeze trim detailing that we believe is hidden behind that, or we would replace it to match the other gable portions of the home. We also intend to add a low slope ramp that wouldn't require handrails for ADA access to that front porch because it is raised roughly 6+ inches from grade. And then there's an existing accessory structure at the rear of the property that Sean has done some extensive research on that. We have a Sanborn map that doesn't show it existing in the 70s. And so we're proposing demoing that accessory structure and rebuilding a new accessory structure that would be more fitting with the architecture of the home. We also are proposing infilling the side porch that exists and adding a small addition adjacent to that for some additional office space. And as far as the windows, some of those are in disrepair, but we propose renovating, restoring those windows to just bring them up to more current look from where they've been deteriorated. So repairing is necessary and installing new windows that would match elsewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The property at 210 Third Avenue North is considered to be a contributing building that was built circa 1890 within the National Register District. It is proposed to replace the roof in kind, remove the asbestos siding, and assess the lap siding underneath. And if it can be preserved, then it will be kept, but if repair is needed, it should be replaced in kind. These alterations meet the intent of the guidelines, but material samples should be included within the COA application. It is also proposed to revert the existing porch roof to what it was previously. An example is in the proposal. Let me get to the page. And provided in the application of a local example is supported by the guidelines. It is also proposed to demolish the circa 1970s accessory structure. The age of the structure is unknown, and it was not shown on the 1950s Sanborn map, but a 1970s map from the National Register listing does not show the structure on the map in 1970. The demolition of the structure appears appropriate per the guidelines. The addition on the south elevation / right elevation appears to utilize insets and offsets for the building additions and alterations. The proposed new accessory structure is placed appropriately and sized appropriately per the guidelines. It is connected by a breezeway that is partially clad in a stone material. The guidelines recommends designing breezeways to be simple in detailing and subordinate to an accessory structure. Since the accessory structure and the principal building are both clad in wood, the guidelines would support utilizing a lap material or simple detailing or railing design that would connect the two. At the front of the building, I'll zoom in to this wonderful rendering. A ramp is proposed, and the ramp will utilize concrete and stone. The ramp appears to take up the entirety of the front yard. The guidelines recommends for residential buildings provide a landscaped front yard and minimize paved or hardscape areas. Do not fully remove and replace traditional lawn areas with hardscape. Additionally, it is recommended to position ramps and lifts on rear or side facades where not readily visible. And there were several project considerations that were made by Building and Neighborhood Services staff, and that we will send to the applicant with the DRC recap. And we also want to commend the applicant on wanting to put some much-needed TLC into this building, and so we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, who wants to start us off? Okay, Mary, go ahead.
I feel like what's submitted is appropriate. I would have, my only thing that I think needs thought through some more is how to address a ramp.
Okay. Brian?
You know, I agree. I think you've done a great job in formulating a plan for this house that definitely needs it. You know, the windows, and I've been around the house when it was kind of on the market, and the windows are in some poor shape, but they are salvageable. And I believe most all of them are original. So as many of those as you can save would be great. The thing I find that's charming about the historic structure, another charming, there's a lot of it's charming, is the side porch. And I know you want to enclose this area for use and space. But I'd like to see if you could think about a way maybe to make it look like it's a porch that had been enclosed. Rather than another solid that you see like what we're seeing here. And I do agree with staff on the covered breezeway, and I'm assuming this is an enclosed breezeway, and that at the top of what you show of a stone wall is glass, or is it just open?
We're showing it as open, just a connector piece to get to the storage. The storage will primarily be used for file storage, so it doesn't directly need to be connected to the house, but we wanted to provide some protection for weather, so it can stand.
I've seen historic properties where they've used lattice as a great screening for something like that.
That'd be great.
And so lattice might actually fit better with the style of the house than that stone wall that we're seeing. But,
We'd be willing to reconsider windows as well if it would be allowed to connect directly to that accessory structure. Sorry.
so what you're saying is you would like to think about enclosing this space.
There's potential. It'd be worth a conversation with Sean to determine that, but right now we're showing it as open.
But I think if it's open, lattice might be a good option for that. Thank you.
Okay. Bob?
I would really work on the front. I think you need to keep some of the lawn, even though it's going to be a commercial structure. It still, I think, needs to read as residential, because it did start out residential. And I think what you're proposing fits the neighborhood, fits the house. Just keep a little land in the front.
And I think that will change more once we really dial in that ramp design. It's based on code to have landings at the top and the connection to the porch, and then at the bottom, keeping that low slope so we don't have handrails, which I think would kind of deter from the look of the house from the street. There's a neighboring property to the right that has a ramp system with handrails, and so a lot of that is concrete. If we can incorporate more landscape to soften that design, that would be, I think, that in our interest to do that.
I know the coffee shop had to deal with the ramp and did it successfully. That might be something to look at.
Okay. And it's a little more difficult to add that ramp to the rear of the house because the grade differential is, I think, closer to 30 inches potentially. So then you're looking at
30 feet?
a switchback of 30 feet of ramp at the back of the house. So
Yeah.
Would it be possible to switch the ramp entrance to the side of the porch rather than coming in right at the very front,
So you're talking to the right side of the house?
to the right side of the house?
So that was my idea as well. There is a water, I don't know if you can pull up one of the pictures of the side of the house. The city put a metal box right there, right on the side of the porch. So I don't know.
Hot box.
Yeah, hot box.
Backflow preventer.
So if the
Love
city would like
those.
to remove that, I'd be happy to do that.
Is that an option? I mean, it might be something worth asking.
we could look into it
Yeah.
and see.
'Cause I prefer it on the right side anyway. But
I'm sure they'll let you do it if you pay for it.
I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, again, not our purview, but the backflow preventer belongs to you because it's on your side of the meter. So you can put it wherever it has to follow their regs, but they're located all over the place.
And the building you referenced next to you with the ramp, I mean, I don't think that would meet our guidelines today. It's not something we would want to see. I'd hate to see that again replicated on this historic property.
We were trying to avoid that and have some kind of landscape wall, but we could always remove that stone landscape wall that we show in that 3D image and just have more softscape landscaping instead
I think I think partly the issue is that it's just paving the whole front yard.
Yeah.
And it's, to Bob's point, there's always a house, and generally speaking, most of them had this little flight of steps, centered up on the door, and the sidewalk is an important part of that kind of neighborhood aesthetic. So now all of a sudden that stair has to shift, railings with it. So that's kind of an oddity. There are some, but it usually is a house that has a lot of side slope grade that they'd had to contend with originally. But all the walls and structure and then paving from, one side of the sidewalk all the way to the house is not something our guideline, I mean, that's why the guidelines are written to put ramps on the sides or rear, is so that we don't have this. So I'd revisit that whole area again. Angela?
I want to agree with that there's so much sensitivity shown to, restoring the porch and the siding and the windows, and that's all wonderful, but doing that with the ramp in the front is really unfortunate. So if there is any way to accommodate that ramp in a different location, the front of the house is obviously really important to how you experience the history of it. So that would just be my comment, to take a hard look at that.
Thank you.
My other comment would be on that connect, that it, is set in and looks separate and all of that. I think the lattice was a great suggestion, a historic lattice, which would be a heavier lattice, not what you go by the sheet of. But I think I would even prefer, if you did it, that it be brick instead of the stone. I think it'd be a little quieter if it came to closing it in.
I agree with that. And having the stone on the front and there seems to me that could be addressed in a more sensitive to the wood vernacular of this building.
I guess I'm still confused at this breezeway, because so you've got walls on both sides of the breezeway?
It's the house, the floor level of the home is roughly 30 inches above the grade. So it's kind of basically an elevated connector that will take you over to the structure, so we don't have stairs taking you down to it. So that will be at guardrail height. The wall will come up and it'll be open from there.
Okay. Yeah, and then I just keep thinking about these stone walls and whatever gets in there. You have to get like a shovel and scoop it out or something. I have no idea how it's even going to function. It's an odd archetype. Usually a breezeway is it's just open. And sometimes they had lattice for privacy, but they were just open. If there's a grade issue, then, oftentimes they have steps and breezeways. There's lots of, it's an odd thing. And to have a house that was all siding, and I'm forgetting about this rock sign in the front because that's not part of the historic discussion. But now we're adding rock and or brick to a house that it's just a siding house. It has foundation, but it's mostly block. Is that correct?
It's blocked. It looks to be some kind of stone rubble foundation on the front street facing side, but
Yeah.
the sides are CMU.
So to have like a 4 or 5 foot tall rock wall seems very random, or brick wall. I'm just
And,
like, what
yeah,
is this?
So that's not to do with it being a foundation problem. That's just a feature.
It was just a connector, to infill and give it.
So I'll step on Aaron's toes.
Yeah, I know, do it, please.
As I said walking in here, I could care less what it looks like. So you tell us what you want to see on it, and I'm happy to do it. And same with, honestly, I prefer it to be enclosed, but I didn't know if city would permit that as a breezeway for a connector for accessory structure.
I think it's at that point it's attached. It's part of the addition, and you could build a different accessory later, depending on setbacks and all kinds of weird other rules you have to meet, but
We just received clarification that if it becomes fully enclosed, then there will be extra parking that will be required.
that's, yeah, it's another room.
So I'm going to go back to the stone wall it's in the front. So if you can reconfigure where the ramp is, you don't need that stone wall at the front, which is kind of inappropriate really for the district.
Right.
And even this breezeway connector, I mean, you may have some porch parts left over, especially from this addition you're doing. Why not just make it look like a porch with railings? I mean, there's so many things that could be done that would look, like it was part of the house.
Yeah, we'll definitely revisit
Yeah,
that.
for
and
it
see
to
if
be
we-
railed on both sides is, you have to think it's like a walk the plank kind of thing. It's like, oftentimes there'd be one on one side and maybe there's steps off the other or something, but to have kind of a bridge, it's kind of, isn't that kind of weird? I keep
Yeah, just
thinking
make
of
it
like
like a porch you walk
Macaulay
up on.
Culkin or something. He's going to his fort.
And while this loads, if it were to be all enclosed, there is the setback requirement that if it were to be an addition, as it is detailed now, it is an accessory structure attached by breezeway. And so the rear setback is 30 feet and it is measuring 29.9 feet, which can stay since it is
Existing non-conforming.
existing, all that jazz. So with it being an accessory structure in the rear,
Needs to be
connected,
detached.
it needs to be detached. So,
Yeah, just look at how that, it doesn't need to be that heavy and introduce some material that really is, I know we have some of that material on the site, but it ought not be there.
Yeah, we can definitely lighten that
So
up.
look at that. Ramp we talked about. I liked Brian's idea of this side porch, right? It kind of looking like a porch enclosed. I'm having a hard time finding exactly what that side porch looks like today, but the front columns are nicer than the others.
It's, right there. Tyler.
That's-
That's what currently.
Okay, yeah, like the the columns probably need to be detailed like the front a little bit, maybe not the little brackets and corbels, but the columns themselves would make it look like porch. I'd like to see a little bit of relief off the corner of this side-facing gable, because it looks like in the renderings, it's just, there's a lot of roof stuff happening, but the siding is just,
We did pull it a foot back.
okay, so
from
it's
that
set back
corner,
a
so
foot from
there is,
that
yeah.
side, that's perfect.
I'm going to have to back off my comment because when I saw this perspective, I was thinking that might be the side porch, but it's right, this part right here, isn't it? Yeah, forget what I said.
It's not that sacred?
No, that I thought that was more, I thought
Yeah.
it was much like the porch on the front, but that's not.
I think this is somebody added a little shed at some.
Exactly. They
Yeah.
It's a hovel attached to the side of the house.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry about that. That was my.
Yeah, I think it could still look like, if you want it to look like a side porch, but what I was getting at is it may be that, and I don't know how this works with your plan, but could the ramp run back to there and you have a new side entrance back there? I have no idea. That may just throw a total bomb in the plan. But it's those type of things that our guidelines do suggest, side ramps with side or rear entrances. I don't mind you using the front entrance if you can do it in a way that, but starting up here at the front yard, you're losing grade, but if the ramp is going up, you probably would have rails because you'll get over that 30-inch mark, maybe.
I think if we can place it on the right-hand side of the house and have enough distance to connect to the front entrance, I think that'd be ideal. Just because all the more private office space that you don't really want public going through is from
Right there.
there back. So
Right.
I think we'll really try to look at that, and if we can relocate that hot box, that would be helpful.
Okay, yeah. I like
Because
that.
I agree with you. We were just struggling to find a location that would give us the ramp length that we needed. And unfortunately, it was either the front of the house or contending with the box on the side. So
And I wanted to mention too, I know there's a picture of the original siding under the asbestos, which is great. Our guidelines recommend when you unpeel all that to reuse it if it's even remotely possible. And usually that looks like a pretty extensive survey of what's there, what's damaged, can we get profiles made, and there's inevitably some patching, but we like to reuse the historic material if it's possible. Is that true, staff? That's how it reads? So I did want to sort of set that expectation. I think that was in your staff report.
It was.
Yeah, okay. Anything else?
Just one more
Question.
thing.
Yes, sir.
Just to give you guys an update as well. I know it's a little bit beyond your purview, but we are also going through the National Park Service with the Federal Preservation Tax Credit, and we are through the first phase of approval. So they
Great.
approved us to start the project, so we're also handcuffing ourselves to the interior modifications, also matching historical standards, and try to bring some more real character back to the building.
Good.
So,
Wonderful.
And
Glad you're doing that.
this is just such a gift. It really is to the historic district.
Yeah.
And I don't know when the last time a tax credit was done here.
Well, according to the state, their historical commission, it's been long enough that none of those files are digitized. You'd have to go back to his paper files to find one in Franklin, which I thought was very odd. But I guess people don't want to do it or are unaware of it, I'm not sure. I plan on writing an article about it once I get all done, and
That would-
hopefully inspire somebody else to do it.
Good.
I thought the old city hall had tax credits on it. I know the Tennessee Historical Commission was involved in that.
May have.
Or Alabaster and Onyx is today.
That could be.
I know that the factory, I think
The
in
factory was a
97
tax credit, and at one time, there were lots of them done on Main Street.
Interesting.
And are you able to use that new market tax credit combined with it or not?
Not that I'm aware of. Right now, they're focusing just on what is contributing to the restoration, not necessarily any of this expanded square footage. So they do
Right.
carve out restoration versus additional space.
Got you.
So.
Understood. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Appreciate
it.
it.
Thanks so much. Item 6, discussion of demolition of an accessory structure, new construction of an accessory structure, and site alterations at 217 Fifth Avenue South. Ben McCreary. Good afternoon. Traded one McCreary for another.
That's right.
Did you guys high five on the way in and out?
We did, yeah, that's right.
Tagged her in?
Passed off the baton. Yeah. All right. So, Ben McCreary, Chisel Workshop. This project is at 217 Fifth Avenue South. We're looking at, there is a 1990s era little random shed in the back that has no relevance to the existing structure. So the proposal is to remove that shed and then to build a new garage that is more consistent with the house that's existing on the property. As you can see in the images, it's a two-car garage. It is smaller than the main house. It will also be shorter than the main house as far as height and things like that. It sits back towards the back of the property, and it'll be, one story with dormers on top, so it'll kind of look like a 1.5 story. The intention is there's no access up there other than a kind of an access ladder, drop-down attic access, so it's not a living space or anything like that at this point. But we're talking about, there's no preparation for that. So really, it's just storage. And then we did include an egress window just for safety up there, because if you're up there and something happens, who knows? So that's part of that, which is on the side gable that's kind of looking towards the neighbor's house. And then beyond that, that's kind of really, we got some paver space. We're keeping the existing drive the way it is until you kind of get within 20 feet of the garage. And at that point, we're talking about changing the pea gravel drive surface to something more hard, potentially stone that matches some of the other stone patio on the site, or concrete or something. It will be an approved material that we'll be looking at with that. We kind of given ourselves just some flexibility because we don't know yet. And then beyond that, we're not really touching anything on the main house or any of the other site other than adding the walkway path and the new parking area.
Okay.
And do you want me to give you sizes or anything like that, so you know the coverages and all that good stuff? Or Covering
I think
20
staff will probably cover
Okay.
some of that. Is that true?
Some, yes.
Some of it. Yeah, we may have questions for you after.
Let me know.
Let's hear from Elizabeth.
Okay, so the application includes two requests, one for the demolition of the accessory structure and the request for new construction of a new accessory structure and some site alterations. The existing structure is a circa 1990 structure and is not historic or contributing to the district. Its removal would not adversely impact the site or surrounding context and is appropriate. For the new construction of the accessory structure, the proposed placement, orientation, and size appear appropriate. However, the height of the principal building is needed for review in light of the guidelines to ensure the new structure is subordinate to the building in this sense. The new structure is proposed to be 21 feet tall. The side and rear facades feature mostly blank walls, and the guidelines would recommend avoiding the use of blank walls. However, since the facade will have limited visibility, feedback about the walls and any detailing would be appreciated. The proposed structure relates to, but is subordinate to the principal building in terms of detailing and ornamentation. The roof form incorporates a flare, and dormers relate to the principal building dormer shape. The materials appear appropriate. However, additional details to confirm the reveal matches the principal building and information about the finishes will be needed. The siding detail on the dormer sidewalls does not appear to relate to the existing dormers, and it would be recommended to relate this detail to the principal building details and siding, as it's diagonal on the accessory structure. Additional feedback about the size, proportion, and placement of the dormers is appreciated. There is additional flexibility for size and scale of dormers on less visible facades, and the dormers appear to meet the guidelines. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, let's, any feedback on the demo? Pretty straightforward on that one.
Appreciate, I mean, if it's new, appreciate that it's going.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, and then comments on the garage itself.
The only comment I would make is that I do agree with staff's comments, especially on the dormers for the siding, rather than being diagonal, it matched the house. It looks to me like it's a very appropriate style for the house that it is. And I'm sure when you come back before us, there'll be some details about the garage doors.
Sure.
And as far as the more blank spaces, walls, and less penetrations, I would say for a garage that's appropriate. I mean, it's not a living space.
Sure.
It's a garage. Generally, this may have a living space, but I'm assuming it's also used for a garage.
That is the intention.
So this, there's two dormers front and back that have this witch's hat roof, hip roof, and then the dormer on the side does not, because it's wider than it is deep.
Correct.
Right? I would love to, even if you want an egress size window there, I'd love to see that dormer sized for that egress window if you need it, and because it's got a funny roof profile in comparison with itself, the garage, and the existing building that all have this double slope bonnet roof thing, and this is the only one that's going to look like a shed. I mean, it's got a 312 on one side and a 912 on the other pieces, so it's definitely an oddball roof. See, it's 912 on the sides of that dormer and 3 on the long, so it's going to be sharp and then really long and flat. So I'd love to see that just rethought to just a simple, even if it's just a single window, because you've got light on 3 sides now, and if that's your egress one, then simplify it so that the roof isn't such an oddity.
I would want to see the rear dormer in the context of the neighbor.
What's it looking at?
Yeah, to make sure. This, to me, looks like living space or going to be living space someday. It doesn't look to me like a simple garage. That doesn't mean we don't approve it, but to your argument of calming down, I mean, 3 dormers is quite a lot.
This is a little bit of an oddball lot because at some point in the past, the owner of this property sold off, I think, about 20 feet of the rear of the lot to the adjacent neighbor. So the adjacent neighbor kind of has an L around behind this where they put a garden or something like that.
Yeah, if you'll just show that situation.
Yeah.
But the dormer somehow, to what Tyler said, needs,
Yeah, I don't mind the dormers. It's just that one, which faces your own backyard, it has a funny roof shape in comparison with all the other. I mean, it has a funny roof shape in comparison to any
It is
dormer roof.
unusual, but the great thing is you can't see it from the front
Yeah,
drive.
yeah. Well, neighbors in the back will see it, and I don't want to get in a habit of considering or approving things that are.
Would it help
not
if I
good
show you
shapes.
the neighbors' properties that they've all got massive additions that would
Yeah.
never be approved today, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
That would help, yeah.
Okay.
I just don't like when we create a situation where all of a sudden you're just lording down over a neighbor's backyard. Do you know how much lower this is going to be than the main house?
I do not off the top of my head, but it's several feet.
Good.
Just based on kind of how the property slopes back as it goes down.
Yeah, I not that I disagree with you on looking into people's backyards, but I'm like, everybody that has a second floor can see into other people's property. Unless you
We've
have a
done-
big property.
We have done some situations.
Where people.
Where it's pretty profound, so I just
Yeah,
like to.
especially because outbuildings have reduced setbacks, which means you're even closer to the edges. So a little more sensitive, but this kind
This-
of, I think it's a false sense of privacy that people have, like, oh, nobody can see me in my backyard.
Well,
I'm
I'll
like,
show you
really?
one day. I'll
Of
show
course
you-
they can.
I'll show you a situation
Yeah.
that,
Can I draw your attention, this top right image, and even the top left one, you can kind of see what is around on the adjacent properties. They are all 2-story blank facades on there. So that's part of the reason why we're not really concerned about what we're looking at, and we've got some space. But we'll be happy to add some more. Yeah.
So you're looking, the rear dormer's looking at another garage?
Yeah, that big
And then
yellow garage.
there's not one on the left looking at
Correct.
the big green garage. And then you're looking at your backyard and your driveway.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the bottom right, or that one right there actually is perfect, that's what you see to the neighbor to the right. So there's no structure there.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on the garage? I think Brian hit on garage doors. Is it you hit on garage doors or Mary? Yeah. Yeah, we'll see those, and we like to have those picked out so that we know exactly what's happening there. We have approved some driveways in stone recently, but they've been debated. I'll say that. In
Yeah.
terms of this apron in front of the garage, I think
It's probably unlikely that it would be stone.
concrete is kind of, everybody's comfortable with concrete. I think stone is, even though we love it and think it's a beautiful material, it's just not as common for driveway materials in almost any Franklin historic districts. We've approved some, but concrete's usually a pretty sure thing. Is that fair to say? Trying to think if there's anything else.
And what about stamped concrete?
Well,
I mean, just in case they ask for it, that's kind of what that's the look they're going for.
Sure.
well,
Concrete would be better.
yeah.
I think.
Like I said, that's the sure thing.
Yeah, if you get to the apron and wanted to do stamped concrete because of the visibility, I'd probably be okay with that. But coming all the way down
I think they're keeping
where
the
you're
gravel.
to the sidewalk of a historic district, that would be.
Not be appropriate.
No.
Yeah, and I think you all are keeping gravel
Yes,
back to the apron.
that is correct.
Yeah. All right.
Or you could put concrete back to the apron.
Yeah, if they wanted to pave it. We've done asphalt back to the apron. Okay. Anything else on this one? Okay, thank you.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Should I walk away, come back?
Demolition and addition and alterations, 1309 Adams Street. Ben McCreary.
There it is, Ben McCrary, Chisel Workshop. We have presented this one last month, but I'll give you a kind of a recap on it, right? It's a small structure at 1309 Adams Street. It is within the historic district of the Adams Street District. It has not been a well-loved property through the years. It is in pretty poor shape, and there have been some modifications to it that are not consistent with what it historically would have been. So part of the intention with this one is to restore it, at least from the front facade, back to its original historic character, which is more helping with the context of the neighborhood. And then adding additions to the back that create more living space for the property owners. It is a very large lot with a very small house on it currently. In relation to its neighbors, it is smaller than all of its neighbors, even with their additions. One thing that I do want to update with you all from our last time is that we did some more exploratory demolition along the front of the house, and unfortunately discovered, as you can see on page page 6, that we pulled off the front siding on the gable, and all the original siding and structure has been removed. It's just plywood behind the vinyl siding on the front. It's hard to tell what's on the sides. I would imagine there's more of the same. There may be some wood siding under there, and so we have produced a methodology that we submitted to staff as well for how we would evaluate kind of the walls and the conditions of the property, what we can salvage and what we think we need to probably reconstruct and things like that. So I'm happy to get into that a little bit more later as well. But really at this point, we've had people look at the property engineers and the contractor based on the conditions that we can see. It's unlikely that there's a lot of the walls that we can just keep. So like we talked about before, we're planning to put in new foundation, new crawl space area. We'll try to kind of shore up what we can based on following methodology, what we think is able to be securely and safely kind of shored up while it's worked on. If not, the intent would be to build back with similar materials, wood siding, wood studs, things like that, but maintain the historic form of the existing house, especially from the street. So really, all proportions maintained, roof lines maintained. Any historic detailing that we can salvage, we will salvage, and we will remake detailing that is consistent with that for the areas we kind of feel like we can recreate. So you can see in the front, we've added some more detailing on the front elevation for the porch. There's some, I'll call it gingerbread for lack of a better term, on the front porch right now that we imagine it was probably similar to that. We can tell kind of other houses around the area have something similar to that as well. So we would be recreating what we can on that, reusing what we've got, and then replicating that with the other things. And then as well as the kind of detailing in the front gable. That is something I would love to have you all kind of input on, as far as it's a very simple kind of design in the front gable that we're adding. And really, we've kind of pulled that from the adjacent property across the street and simplified it a little bit, because that property does have more ornate detailing than we can kind of surmise from this one. At this point, we are asking for 59.76% for the property of footprint. We're asking for an addition that's 59.76% of the existing structure. So the existing footprint is 2,234 square feet, and we're asking to add 1,335. total of 3569. The lot size is 40,000 square feet.
Okay. Let's hear from staff here. Please.
Thank you. We appreciate the applicant returning to another DRC meeting to discuss the proposal for the principal building at 1309 Adams Street and the care for detail and attention that's going to be given to this building and site. This building is a circa 1900 gabled L dwelling and is contributing to the National Register Historic District. As an extensive amount of demolition of the building is proposed in order to reconstruct the building, one of the criteria for demolition must be submitted for and reviewed by staff and the commission to be considered. The documentation must show the deterioration of the building and why elements of it must all be demolished. With the intent to preserve the existing form, massing, and character-defining features, the project will be reviewed as a historic residential building with alterations and an addition proposed to it, so as to preserve and maintain an appropriate standard for reconstruction and likeness to the existing building. However, we would like your feedback and direction as to which section of the guidelines should apply as a historic residential building or as new construction, due to the high degree of demolition and reconstruction proposed. At the time of building permit submittal, this will be reviewed as a new construction project by Building and Neighborhood Services Department for code requirements due to the extensive demolition. The existing specifications of the building need to be carefully recorded to fully document the structure and enable its careful review and reconstruction. Side-by-side elevations of the existing building and what is proposed should be included in the submittal for review. The 1930 porch details are unknown. The new porch detailing should be designed simply to reflect the styles of the surrounding buildings of similar age and style. It does appear that some of the proposed specifications for reconstruction do not entirely align with the existing building, such as on the left elevation, there is an existing change in roof form around the point of the third window from the left. These alterations to the existing building should be noted in any plans moving forward. Additionally, new windows and openings are proposed on the reconstructed historic portions. The size of the addition exceeds the recommended size for an addition, as it is 59% of the historic footprint, as provided by the applicant, and should be reduced to be no more than 50% of the historic footprint per the guidelines. The addition on the rear of the building does utilize some insets and offsets to show change over time. However, a more complex roof form is proposed, and low-slope roofs are proposed over the addition that are not seen on the historic building. However, the existing roof pitches have not been provided to staff at this time for review. A pop-up light dormer is proposed on the right elevation. The proposed item does not meet the requirements of a dormer. It should be removed from the sidewall by at least 30 inches, have a slope of 3/12, and be removed off of the main ridge. An additional perspective should be provided to better understand the visibility of this proposed element. The proposed covered entrance on the left elevation protrudes past the existing building, and the guidelines would recommend locating new porches or stoops with limited visibility. The proposed window patterns and placement on the addition do not align with the guidelines, primarily those on the rear and sunroom. The windows should be compatible with size, detailing, placement, and rhythm as to those on the historic building. The windows should be double hung or have the appearance of being double hung and match the material of the historic windows on the building, which are wood. The use of transoms is not seen on the existing historic windows and would not be appropriate over the proposed new windows. The solid to void ratios on the rear of the building do not align with that of the historic building. However, the exact size of the historic windows is not known for comparison, but the placement where it is nearly abutting the floor is not traditional or seen on the building as it is proposed at the rear. Details on where and how the historic windows will be stored in order to preserve and be reused will need to be provided to staff. Additional information is needed for the proposed new gable details based on historic precedent note within the plans. And as mentioned, staff would appreciate feedback and direction on the guidelines that should be applied to the proposal due to the high degree of demolition and reconstruction proposed. Additional feedback on the proposed form of the addition, dormer, window patterns, materials, and placement are appreciated. Additional material specifications, elevations, and documentation of the existing building are needed for reconstruction and the request for alterations and an addition to the building. Thank you.
Lot to tackle here. Let's talk first about this new guidelines, historic guidelines, I think I heard you say that BNS will consider this new construction because of the amount of demo, regardless of how we decide to review it. Okay, understood. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just would like more clarification on that. What does that actually mean? What is the difference?
I think, and Jared, you may want to come up here and talk for just a second.
But I mean, what is the difference as to our guidelines?
Well,
I
it
realize
has,
that.
yeah, it has to do with like windows and things like that. Materiality can be different. Like we can use hardy on a new house, hardy siding. And with a historic, we would not, right? There's just some differences in guidelines as it applies to form, massing, materials, all those things. And then, Jared, code-wise, I think, I thought that was what Mr. Last was asking, but it'll have to be completely to current IRC code.
That's correct. There's a lot of things that will apply with that as far as zoning wise and code wise. All the new codes will apply to that for all the new portion. That's correct.
Okay. Do you have more specific questions?
No, so I take it that nothing will really be saved. None of the really stud walls or the trusses, everything has to be redone and brought up to code.
As far as I understand, correct.
Well, I would argue that the old part of the house, in my mind, even with as much as being replaced, it's still a preservation project.
Sure. Yeah, my thought is, I don't really know which way we ought to review it, new or old, but I suspect that even if we said, okay, it's a brand new house, codes is going to review it as a new house, it is a new house, we would still condition it and approve it in a way that says it better look like that when it's done.
That's
Right?
right. Right.
So to me, it really doesn't matter. I would say we will be, the commission, and feel free everybody jump in, would probably be, like I said, conditioning or expect conditions of approval to include things like real wood siding on the historic replica or whatever we're going to call it, all wood windows, an appropriate roof style. So it's basically all the historic guidelines that apply to a historic structure, but it's going to be a new building, right? And it has to meet all the code requirements that BNS is going to set forth, like stud spacing and foundations and footings and rebar and rough ends. All these things have to meet current code. And I think that's really the rub for me is I think your drawing set's got to be so extensive to kind of cover those things. Like, is it going to go from a 2x4 rafter to a 2x10? Where's that 6-7 inches going to appear? Is it coming out of the ceiling, the attic? Is it, and those are things we want to consider. If it changes an eave or a roof pitch a little, we want to know and understand all those things from the approval standpoint.
Well, the reason that I feel it's a preservation project, I'm sure it would have been a lot simpler just to tear it down and rebuild it, and that is not being done. Great care is being taken
Right.
to preserve what they can and keep the form exactly by not just tearing it down and rebuilding. So the idea just really doesn't go over with me that this is not a preservation project with the amount of work that is being done.
There is some precedent with Miles Manor project over where the garage was restored, but we laid down a facade wall and then put it back up, and that's really what was saved, the street-facing facade. And the rest was new construction that was rebuilt. I'm not sure that one was classified as new construction when it was.
I think with this, in the
Permanent.
sense that only one gable front-facing wall is being potentially preserved, and foundation work needs to be taken care of underneath the building, if that wall moves, it is considered a full demolition. Even if it's stored off-site, Building and Neighborhood Services would classify this as a fully new construction per our code official.
I think one thing that I would be concerned about from a architectural standpoint is the windows for egress in bedrooms and things like that. I'm not confident that some of these side windows right now would meet egress with the double hung at the size they are, so we would most likely need to make larger double hung windows in those spaces to accommodate egress for bedrooms.
And these are on the side.
They're on the side.
Yeah, these are things that we may have to consider, and I don't know, other jurisdictions have committees called all different things. I think Metro's is a rehab committee. You can go in and it's BNS and historic, and they can all come to an agreement like, all right, what's more important? Can we make a concession one way or the other on something? I don't know that we have a mechanism like that, but we would hear those arguments, especially on windows that are on the side. But, you know, I think our expectation is if there's windows that can be saved, that we would try to reuse them. And we just have to hear a compelling argument not to. And it may be that code is the argument. I don't know.
That's what I was going to mention. From the building official's standpoint, it would be completely new. So it would have to meet the required egress standpoint. So
Right.
Those may not meet that.
So if one wall was to remain standing, does that still
I would
count as a
recommend
new?
speaking with Mr. Tosh about that
Okay.
and just speak further about it and see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say that I do agree with Mary. I mean, if our board had, so we're talking about a codes issue and historic guidelines issue. So codes has to be met. So with historic guidelines, if we had voted to demolish this house, then we would consider, yes, this is new construction, but we did not vote that. And this is a preservation as much as possible of historic structure. And I would say that our guidelines, we should do the historic as though it's historic in our guidelines.
Yeah.
I don't see how this house can be occupied without doing this,
Right. Well,
in
and-
light of how current
Yeah.
conditions.
Yeah, and I think from staff standpoint, you all are considering this. When it comes to the commission, a voting meeting, you will be asking us for an approval of demolition and then a permit for reconstruction. Is that correct?
Yes, one of the demolition criterion should be met or addressed with a structural engineer's report because it's noting only one wall will remain of the building, and that may not remain with extensive work that may need to be done on it as well.
So we will have to vote on demolition.
Yes.
Yep. Which we've done before at this project. But I think at that point, it was, we're going to tear it down and maybe do something totally different. So this is different. Like I said, I think we could condition a demolition, approval for demolition based on, yes, you're approved for demolition with all these conditions that we're headed back to whatever we are going to approve, if that makes sense.
Well,
Which
we
is
did
different.
this. We did this on Morningside Drive. And it turned out fantastic.
Yeah, you did.
On Morningside Drive. And in fact, when they did a historic survey of that property, and I was out there with them, they thought that was the
Did
historic
they?
original structure. And I said,
That's
no.
great. That's great. Yeah.
So yeah, I would, yes. We did that with Morningside. It went back exactly like it was before. And it was
They
Chisholm
did a
that did it.
fabulous job. That happened at, is it, help me, Brian, is it the old ticket office of the railroad? That happened there. But the thing that I guess bothers me about this is it was bought and told it couldn't be demolished. And now we're going to go here, and I just hope one wall can remain standing. I'll just say that, or be, done a piece at a time so it is standing.
I've seen this in Nashville. 3 houses down from me in Nashville had the most extensive termite damage I've ever seen, and the family had to move out. And I came home one day from work, and about 6 inches of a side wall to the left and then the other side of it. And it was completely taken down, but it was completely rebuilt in the same style, same square footage.
And I would say to you, that point, Mary, that is a sticking point to me too, about the demolition part of it. But we've gotten new information. I mean, we've had more extensive information about what was in the walls. I mean, they've torn off this, we can tell there's no siding, it's plywood. So, we're basing this now on new information.
Well, as the architect and representing the property owner, is there a preference?
My concern would be there's really not much left.
Okay.
That's historically significant to save.
Looking at those photos, I don't see, you don't have an option,
Right.
it seems. It's already,
They did lipstick it. The exterior, I'm like, that doesn't look too bad.
Right, right.
They painted.
That's right. Now, we still have the opportunity to, we don't know what's on the other elevations, and part of our methodology is that if we can save some of the historic siding and things like that, if it's viable, our preference would be to keep it at least for parts of the front elevation. I just don't know what's there right now, so I think we're asking for the flexibility to say, if we can, let's do it, but if not, we would like to replace it with similar wood, and we would be happy with, the kind of different bullet points you need to add that kind of say, no hardy, let's use wood, because that would be our preference as well.
And it might be helpful for staff. This, again, I think this is going to be, or has the potential to be, a very complicated approval just from a making a motion standpoint. So if you're able to kind of bullet point things, like literally bullet point it, and staff has that as well, then it might make it easier for us to say, that we may be moving for like an approval of demolition with a condition that this set of plans is approved. And that set of plans includes things like reuse of rafter tails and corbels and things, and recreation of those that can't be reused. I mean, that much detail that we can go, it feels like all the detailing and things that are important to getting it back to looking like it does today are met. And it might simplify things for us instead of us making a motion with 5,000 conditions and trying to remember them all. Because it's going to be it should be a boatload, I would guess.
And all the measurements.
Yes.
Anybody else have any feedback on this one? There's a lot to it.
Yeah, I think we should discuss the pop-up dormer. I mean, this is a single-story house. To see that pop-up dormer, it really does not look like you would see on this structure.
So if I can draw your attention to the 3D perspectives that we've got on the last couple pages. So the first, that one, go back one page. That is, based on the way the building sits on the site, this would be a view from the street looking down the left side of the building, right? So in that, before you would ever get past, the next building will start to obscure it at some point. It will never be visible from any street perspective ever. The only time you would ever be able to see that elevation is if you were kind of in the side yard. If you go, you can kind of stroll around to the other ones. We tried to take these perspectives, like that's from the street on the right side of the building, right? And that dormer will be completely obscured from the roof line on this side. And then I guess the next one, that's the back, really the back gable will obscure it. You see it in the full flat 2D, but really that perspective is never achievable with the way the site is and just sight lines around
And it's
the
a very
house.
large gable. I mean, I know we've had many of these discussions, like on Lewisburg with the cabin and the type dormers that they want to put on the side. I mean, it just seems to be, large, on that side of the house. But I'm open to, for discussion.
I mean, I agree. It's it's big. If there's a way to minimize it, it's just I always have this kind of unwritten rule in my head about like 50% of a roof mass. It starts to look like a second story. And if you take that's actually a written rule in other jurisdictions where it's 50% of the roof mass can be covered in dormer, because it still looks like a dormer then, as opposed to say like an outbuilding and they dormer the whole length of the garage. Well, now it just looks like a second story. So you might reconsider the length of that. Anything else you wanted to hit on?
Yeah, so I noticed I don't see really an indication of a foundation. What type of foundation are you proposing?
So we would be proposing a CMU foundation for the new part, especially for meeting the building codes. But we talked about previously, it is a stone rubble foundation that is currently there, and our hope would be to save that stone rubble foundation, split the block, or split the stone, reapply that to the 1900 and 1930s edition, or original portions of the house, or where they would have been if we do a demolition. And then the rest of it would be probably CMU with a PARG code or something that is clearly differentiated between old and new.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to this right side porch thing. Typically, we don't allow things to poke out the side like that. So that's a little bit different. I'm wondering if you might be able to achieve something similar by just letting the bridging roof go across and recess your entrance there back a little bit more.
I think before we were trying to maintain, that's the historic wall of the building, so that, where that kind of doorway
The
is
jut
right now.
is.
Yeah, that little jog-in was kind of, that's the historic footprint. So we were trying to keep that, but provide some sort of a cover and a moment that differentiated new and old.
I would be more in favor of just a simple extension of the roof above with no columns. You know, just the same slope that's there keeps instead of kind of a separate peeled off metal roof. I mean, the guidelines don't recommend coming out the side, and that comes out the
I
side.
can't think of the right word right now, but if it were held by brackets, maybe instead of columns, I don't know if you call them brackets.
That
Yeah,
was my thought too, Mary, on that. I think what Tyler said is a good solution to that, but what you said too is also, an awning with brackets.
Yeah,
Well,
with
that would come out of
corbels.
the side, you had corbels,
yeah, some brackets that go back to the wall.
take the load back to the wall.
Right.
But you're still, the roof extending beyond the
Right.
sidewall is still something
Right.
you're not considering, is that correct?
Well, I think it'd be less impactful then. And I think it's a little more obvious now because it's a different roof slope. I think if it were a little more subtle, just carry the slope of the connector piece between gables,
Sure.
might be a little softer. And Mary was saying maybe it is a little metal roof. And maybe it sits down a little lower because it's up in the
Right.
air. Usually, little side porches like that, the porch rack and the roof, the porch rack actually conceals a little bit part of the window and door heads. So
Again, the porch would nest up under
Yeah.
the roof.
downplay that a little bit more than it is, I think, is the point.
And off of Cummins Street here in Franklin, it's the old Cummins house. There is a little stoop
That's
with
what I was
brackets
thinking, yes.
on a side wall.
I think I've got
Yeah.
one on my phone too, but I turned my phone off and it's taking a minute.
Any thoughts on these transom windows?
I agree with staff.
I do too. This furthest back piece here that's completely glassed in is kind of a solarium, conservatory kind of thing. I've seen some original historic ones.
I guess I better turn it back.
Mary's boyfriend's texting her. I've seen some historic ones where it's paneled at the bottom and there's a window sitting up at a certain sill height, but it's a single window. And then I've seen some that are original that actually have a window at the bottom, so it's like a lower transom, but you have a solid window from kind of a chair rail height up. This seems like a more contemporary interpretation. And that particular box, as well as this kind of door with casements. So I think our guidelines recommend double hungs or double hung appearance. So see if you can reconfigure that, I would say. And there are very few occasions where we've approved transoms, and it's usually when there's one above a front door on a Victorian or something where we've let them put it back or something. But
And this box
Well,
solarium,
isn't there one over the front? There is a transom over the front
yeah,
door.
just at the front door. Yeah.
Yeah.
but the box solarium reminds me more of, a modern four-season sunroom than it does, historic, what you would put on as addition on the back of a historic home.
We would design it better than a modern four-season sunroom, but, and I
Well, I
trust
would
you
hope
would.
so.
Yes.
I would hope so. But I think, some more thought could be put into that, too.
But it sounds like the transoms are a sticking point on the back. Taller windows would be okay, or are you still window heads consistent across the
Yeah, like
facade is what you're
the-
looking for, or?
That I assume this is a kitchen or something with the triple.
It is.
Yeah, if those were just full height, including the transom, and all three of them, or even better if it was just a pair of double hungs, like because we have pairs on the house, I'd go perfect. You got tall glass, but it meets our guidelines, double hung, and pairs were more common than triples, especially on side elevations.
And I bet your front windows that are double hung on this house are probably like 86 inches already. There's some big windows. It's at
They're
least
big.
tall. They're tall.
Okay.
And try to look at that, see what, I think the head heights though on the rear, I mean, I'd like to see those come down. Maybe where not go all the way up to where the transoms are. That would be a very large window.
Yeah, and part of it's the eave of this, the conservatory piece there is taller than the eaves on the rest of the house. So here's a scale thing. You're probably wanting a little extra volume in that room, but I don't think the ceilings in this house are short to start, are they?
Only in the front, they're tall, but in the additions, they're
Yeah.
8 feet.
Well, we're starting over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
I
addition can be taller.
Yes, I
I
was.
mean, give me the flexibility,
Yeah, I was going to have a lot of sympathy on, when everything was being done as it stands. But I do think pulling that down a bit.
Yeah.
Or the other up, I don't know which now.
Well, why not reimagine it as a rear porch that's been enclosed? I mean, there's all kinds of ways to look at it.
That's kind of where we were headed. We just had more
Yeah.
glass in the top of it. But,
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of this boxy look with that it almost looks, from this vantage point, I'm looking at like a pyramid roof. I know that's not what it is,
Right.
but I mean, that's a totally different roof form.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're not there yet, but once you get pilasters and trim and what trim would be a porch rack, things like that, it'll start looking more porchy. But yeah,
So just more detail and taking
Yeah.
some of this into account.
yeah, and that eave thing, you might look at that.
Yeah.
The transoms, again, I mean, the whole back of this house is glass and casements, which our guidelines don't recommend, and transoms.
There is well, I guess it's there's an oddity window on the right side. So we were kind of pulling some of that concept from, let me go to the page and see if I've got it in here.
On the addition back there, the long windows.
So on kind of this first, the third page, on the bottom left, it's still a double hung though, so I'm not, it doesn't, it has muntins, whereas all the others are 1/1s. There is one that's got muntins, so we were kind of pulling some, inspiration from
there.
that, only in the back, right, where it's not really the main front, but we were kind of, having a bunch of 1/1s in the back does, to me, if we're doing big windows, it feels more modern than something that has actual muntins to kind of break down the light sizes.
Yeah.
Well, I do know for a fact on these vernacular Victorians, the front, you usually had the 1/1, because that's the front. You put on a front. It's your best windows. And as you move to the rear, you have these 4/4s. It's very common in Franklin. That was a common window.
Okay.
But the thing in the very back was not, the Munton pattern is that it looked like a true double hung, and that the head heights come down, or it's not all glass.
All right. Seeing if there's anything else that we've talked ad nauseum about the demo part. Chimneys, a new chimney. Looks like it's detailed very similarly to the original, or will be.
Yes, so the intent was to basically keep the little front chimney. We're not going to be using that anymore, so I would like to keep that smaller profile of it, because you can't build modern chimneys that small really anymore. So we would like to keep that one, even if we're reconstructing it, same brick, things like that. The one in the rear would be a larger chimney, because it just has to be to fit the beam.
Good bit shorter, though.
It is a good bit
Just good.
shorter.
Okay.
So you're
Yes.
saying you just build around the original chimney with its foundation, or you want to put a faux chimney at the top?
We'd probably just put that original chimney back up at the top, just from the roof line up.
I got you.
Floating.
Yeah.
Okay. And the front porch, I think we talked about the front porch last time. You walked us through how it got to where it is and why we want to go
Right.
back. I think you got good feedback on that
Mhm.
from the commission. So, anything else we need to cover? Staff, anything you want us to speak to specifically? Or Ben, anything?
I do have a question on the rear, the door. So looking at that one where it's got the double door and then all the windows beside it. If we follow down the path of doing double hungs with potentially even a higher head height, would you want to see a tall, like an 8-foot door there instead of a 6'8" with a transom? Or kind of what would the commission be more amenable to? Because I don't want to have it go like high windows down to a door kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I was thinking you bring that head height down, not up.
Shorter windows and
Yeah.
everything.
I mean, I don't know if I conveyed that or not. Instead of those transoms, not bringing that window up to where the transoms are, but bringing all that down.
Sure, but I feel, yes, I hear what you're saying.
So.
We would love to have
go
more
ahead.
glass in the back. We'd love to have more light in the back than like a 6'8" window head would be able to allow. So that's kind of why we're asking for more glazing back here, because these have a great backyard, kind of looks out towards, the park and things like that. I don't know if it's not this park, but, there's a grassy area behind it.
I think part of what's messing with our eye too is they're all sitting on the floor. In most historic houses, it's like you don't ever see any windows
Sure,
sitting
so,
on the floor.
Yeah,
So
we
it
would
could be.
happy to raise them up to kind of create a more historic-looking proportion.
I think it'd just be a little more balanced that
Continuing
way.
to squish them down is one where we would love to have some feedback on whether you would consider letting us have higher glass than what we would have seen along the front or something like that, just because it's
Yeah.
different back there.
I'd like to see it at a little bit, somewhere in between. I'd entertain looking at a drawing that's 8 feet head, but it needs to all look like it's proportionate. Like the existing house has some pretty tall head heights and tall windows, but the door is probably not that tall.
It's not,
And
it has
that's
that
why it has that
transom over it.
transom. So
And
it's
you
like,
know what, and that's the thing about these, if we're looking at from the historic perspective, everything is going to be in the front, and it's going to start to come down at the back.
yeah.
So, that's the only thing that I see on historic. It starts to come down in the back. And this goes up again.
But I guess we're not trying to mimic historic at
We're
this
not,
point in
we're
the
not trying to
back.
mimic. And I
So-
know you can come up with a good solution.
I appreciate that.
Is that room vaulted in there?
The intention was for it to be higher, yeah.
I mean,
Because
it
we
may be
pulled all the eaves down low to kind of be lower in the back, but that, if we were to kind of make the ceiling like an eave, it'd be an 8-foot ceiling back there. But since it's a new addition, we have the flexibility to raise the ceiling heights in there while we keep the eaves down, which forces us into kind of, vault or cathedral type
Yeah.
of thing. So that's kind of where we were hoping for, this is the new living space in the back of the house, right? This is where
Yeah.
the light would be and all of those things.
I'm just wondering if in that gable there's a smaller accent window and you do lose the transoms and it starts to fill and give you a little light there. But you're not lacking for glass. I don't, you're, the whole back of the house is, you know,
I just want to make sure there, for putting myself in a bind here, there are no story-and-a-half windows on the front gables. So if I
Yeah.
put it in the back, I just don't want to run the risk of being like, well, now you've put
well,
this
you,
window
you
in the back.
got
and
story and a
that's
half
not
windows. You
consistent.
just added a dormer on the top.
But that's different. It's hidden in the roof line, not in the gable.
Well, this, what I would say is on the front of this house today, there's a vent. It's not uncommon that historic homes had a vent in the gable. And they are often, those little accent windows can be sized in a way that, oh, it is a small accent window. It's not like a big 3050 double hung. They're like, 14 inches wide and 20 inches tall. They're just little accent windows that would have been what was in a gable vent. So do with that what you will, but it's an opportunity. You've got a vaulted space, and it is new. It's just this amount of kind of, it feels modern to have the entire wall covered in glass and transoms. So just look at trying to do something more kind of historically appropriate, just out of honor for the neighborhood, neighbors, and the house itself, is what I'd say.
And 202 Gallery, the addition on 202 Gallery might be a good, because they do have a little accent window, and they have vaulted ceilings. But they don't have windows that go floor to ceiling almost.
I think that the fact that the windows go all the way down to the ground is what is snagging our eye. I mean, it's beautiful, but not appropriate possibly for this.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel like it's respectful to the style of the rest of the house, would be. But can still have a lot of glass. I get that.
Yep, I appreciate the feedback.
Anything else? All right. Thank you.
Be easy next time.
This will be the longest motion in the history of the Franklin Historic Commission, or any historic commission of all time.
And we will check, I don't know if it helps to, at this point, does it help to check with staff or the BNS to see about the possibility of how much we would have to save to stay a renovation, or is there really a benefit?
That's all your all's department.
Yeah, but I say,
It doesn't change your,
try to.
the feedback doesn't change.
It doesn't us, but try to understand it,
Sure,
I would say,
sure. All right.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
Does it matter, I guess if we're doing that, then there's no point for the preservation methodology summary? That is no
I
longer
think it's still,
necessary?
that's probably your starting place for that bullet point list.
Sorry, yep.
Thank you, Siri.
Siri thinks so too.
Yeah, I think the preservation methodology is still valid because it talks about, as we uncover things, what happens to those things. It's like, well, we want you to save and reuse some of that stuff. Just like if we were not tearing the walls down, but we were taking the skin off and we were pulling windows out to have them repaired. All of those things are still valid, I think. Is that fair? So even though that document might change now because of where the project's headed, I still think a lot of what you wrote in there are valid processes for getting us from where we are today to where we're hopefully headed.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, staff announcements before we adjourn.
The deadline to apply for the February 9th Historic Zoning Commission meeting is this Friday by midnight. That's it.
Okay. It is. It is. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. Until we meet again.